peaceful and beautiful and physical and angry all at the same time.
Were you idiot, your mind would cave in and your heart would explode within your chest.
This is going to be a shame.
Here we go!
Away we go, good listener. Welcome inside the TCA studio. It is Matt Robinson along with you for another edition of the Tall Can Audio Podcast. Thanks for checking this one. I got to be honest with you. I've been looking forward to this one since Sunday night, I think, was when I touched base with Dave for the first time. Dave Bidini from the Rio Statics, the West End Phoenix, and a writer of many hockey books, going to join me today. And when he said yes to doing the show, I got pretty fired up. This is a guy with tremendous perspective on the hockey world from a far wider lens, I think, than most of us tend to view it. And so I thought it might be a really good time to have a conversation with him. So really happy he agreed to do that. And I think this will probably be the last thing for at least a little while on the whole Olympic thing. We can put the nationalism away for a little while. It hasn't really brought out the best in any of us here over the last few days. But I was really glad, after asking Dave, he had another piece come out in the Toronto Star that we'll ask him about here in a minute, that I think sums some of this up well and maybe would do us all some good to keep in mind here. I'll link to it in the show notes and we'll ask him a little more about it here. But just sort of how, if you'll allow it, if you want it to, you can understand how this gold medal for Team USA, no matter what you might think of the current athletes and the political climate and everything, can still reflect well on us as a nation, even if we had to lose to get there. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow. Dave will do a better job of explaining it than I will, but I thought it was interesting. After this, we are back into NHL action. Spring training is underway. The World Baseball Classic is now not far off at all. So we will sort of turn our attention back to more typical sports things, although I suppose the World Baseball Classic has nationalism written all over it again. I can't imagine a scenario where we get deep enough to face the Americans again and have this become a thing, at least on this border, but we'll see. But lots of good stuff on that front still to come on the podcast. So if this is your first time here and you enjoy what you hear on the show, and now to Dave Bidini and some of the other guests that are up now at tallcanaudio.com or on the feed, I hope you'll subscribe and stick around because we're going to have some fun here over the next few weeks. With all that out of the way and all that said, let's finally bring him in here from the West End Phoenix and certainly the Rio Statics, a guy who's also written quite a bit over the years on the sport of hockey. It's a perfect time to talk to him. Dave Bidini, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. And as I said, I always appreciate you making a little time for us here. And I want to kind of come at this from a couple different angles. I got a couple things to ask you about,
Sure.
But let's start with your most recent piece here for the Toronto Star, and came out just after the Olympics ended. And I thought you kind of painted an interesting picture on how maybe Canada can understand this victory for Team USA a little bit differently, because it's sort of early on here brought out the worst in a lot of us, and maybe that's kind of, there's a lot of politics tied in. There's a lot of big brother, little brother tied in. There's a whole lot going on here. But can you take us inside what made you want to write that piece for the Star?
I just wanted to point a little bit, really kind of almost beyond like the arena, certainly in the context of, American hockey, to talk a little bit about people, American hockey fans, the American hockey fans that I've known for, ever since my first book came out, like around 2000. So 25 years, quarter of a century. Americans that reached out to me after my first few hockey books came out, and certainly and relationships that I've kind of forged with them. And one of the things that became apparent to me early on, from after talking to these Americans really right across the country, was how much they knew about Canada and how much they really honestly loved Canada. And insofar as, man, I have friends who made road trips to Winnipeg, went across Saskatchewan and watched junior hockey there, and into Quebec, and certainly to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. And that's actually, many encounters there where, you'll see someone. I remember after Ryan O'Reilly came to Toronto in the trade from the Blues, a family in Blues sweaters with O'Reilly on the back, and they were clearly visitors. They were tourists, and just striking up a conversation with them, and the depth of their knowledge of the country and the gift that Canada has given the world was really quite strong and profound. And I just think we needed to kind of carve a minute to kind of consider them, right? And out of the context of the actual players on the American national team, which is a whole other, probably a whole other interview. But I felt kind of, I was happy for them. Especially, listen, these two teams have been in countless games against each other over the last 25 years. And, we always managed to, sneak past them, right? And and the fact that it's kind of, if you see it from the other side, I think you can kind of appreciate the moment that they're having right now.
And I think this is the thing that we're having so much trouble separating with. I know you are a little like me in that we probably spend too much time on Twitter where you see some really ugly stuff. That doesn't represent everybody, right? That doesn't represent the whole world, but it's hard to zoom out on it. And I remember you probably saw the same thing. And Dave, I don't know if it was ever even real. It might have just been a meme that some clever writer came up with. But after Vancouver 2010, there was this line going around that an American had watched the way Canada reacted to the gold medal hockey game and said, you know what? I'm glad they won it. It meant so much more to them in that moment.
Well, yep.
And it does seem like we're having a hard time giving that back to those hardcore hockey fans in the United States right now.
Of course, and you flicked at it earlier in terms of the big brother, little brother, big sister, little sister relationship that we have with them. And very rarely, really do we ever get a chance to go, to meet them head on. Hockey's the only place where we really are able to do that. And, those games are super important because we get a chance to, take down the giant to the south. And it's just so, rewarding to us culturally, just as people, when we're able to do that. But it's true. When you think about 2002 was like 50 years after Canada's first goal, after Canada last won a gold medal at the Olympics. We had to have it, right? We had to have it, and we did. And I actually remember I telephoned Brad Pascal, who's the assistant GM with the Calgary Flames, and it was a friend of mine who had reached out to me after Tropic of Hockey came out. He was working for Hockey Canada, and he reached out. We became friends. And I remember when he was still working for Hockey Canada, he was in the dressing room in 2002. The morning, it was an afternoon game, I guess. So it was the morning of the skate, and I called him, and he was in the room, and I said, like, how's everybody doing? Like, how are the players? And he said, Dave, these guys are so excited. They can't wait to go. And it made me think, oh, that's why they're hockey players and I'm not, right? Because they were like they embraced the challenge of that moment. And so they had to have that victory, and they did. And certainly in 2010, it's the same. The games are in Vancouver, and we'd never won a gold medal on home soil before. So, and I do think for America and the American program and the American teams and the American players, this one was pretty big for them. It was clearly the best national team they ever had. Yes. The expectations were high. So if they were good, if they weren't going to take one this year in this tournament, I'm sure they would have been asking themselves whether they ever would. So I think you have to kind of look at their victory in relationship to ones that we have had in the past, and how sometimes it just kind of tilts that way.
I'm curious when you think, and maybe it's impossible to have an exact moment or an exact date, but there was a long time there where the best rivalry in hockey, at least in our eyes, was Canada-Russia, right? And we did 72 and 81, they took it from us, and it was back and forth all over the place. But it was in a very political light, as so many things are, right? It's West versus East, it's capitalism, communism, it's our way of life versus their way of life, and all these games Maybe not quite to the same extent that it was for USA Russia in 1980, but still very similar. At some point, though, the wall fell and communism fell and the Soviet Union became Russia, and we sort of turned our attention to the United States, and it sort of, we played them in the World Cup final or Canada Cup final in 91, and then the World Cup 96 they took from us, and 02 gold medal game in Salt Lake you referenced. Is it just natural that once the Soviet Union fell and we've still got this monster to our south that, that's where our attention turned? Did it happen kind of through the 90s there? When did it sort of, for you, switch that, this is our big rival now on the hockey front?
I think for the Americans as well, the collapse of the Soviet Union and Russia, and them, being a lesser hockey program. I mean, even when I had gone over there to travel and to film our second hockey documentary, Hockey No Man Goes to Russia, the Russians would tell us about, there was way less money for state sport. They couldn't develop the kind of players that they had in the past. And those players, were coming to North America to play. Mm-hmm. So because that program, those teams weren't as strong, the top tier of international hockey, if that's Canada and Russia, and it was Canada and Russia, it just softened a little bit. And I think the Americans were able to push upwards with a little bit more light ahead of them. So I think that kind of happened. I also think, like, with the American program, you see the kind of growth of hockey there. I mean, there's a lot of certainly there's a legacy reason. There's a legacy cause in terms of retired players staying there, whether it's Shane Doan in Arizona, Jeff Brown in St. Louis, and on and on and on. Sure. Whether it's those people developing the programs there, or it's just a case of you've seen the growth of basketball in Canada because it's a new toy for kids of a new generation. They're going to go in the opposite direction of their parents, and I think that's helped grow that program a little bit in the States too. It's exotic, right? I mean, if you're a kid who kind of who wants to do something a little bit differently in terms of how what your sporting life is like, then you're going to look to hockey. It's exotic, it's different, it's new, it's a path you can carve on your own. So I think that kind of helped pull together that program.
We talk about it up here, right? The Vince Carter effect in Toronto. Sure. We could be looking in 15 years of another wave. I know the Americans are on the come regardless in hockey, but
also, Matt, to that point, American teams dominating the Stanley Cup for 26 years, that's also part of that that legacy. When you're parading the cup constantly through American cities, it's going to have an effect on those local programs and stuff too. So, but definitely, like, I remember, we've talked, before the gold medal game, and really throughout the 2 weeks of the Olympics, people were talking about how kind of terrifying the states were on a certain level, and how it being probably the best, most skilled team that they'd iced. And I think it is true. I think it is true that it's probably the best team, but I just want to kind of make Canadians feel a little bit better about themselves here for a minute. I don't think they were really that infinitesimally better than they were in 2010.
Or 02, Doug Waite and Jeremy Roenick and Tony Amonte and Brian Leaf. They've brought good teams before.
Mike, right? No, that's 100% true. So, they haven't. And I think that was borne out in the gold medal game as well. They're not Galacticos, to borrow that, a Spanish term for football stars. Listen, great players, and you'd want all of them on your team, and certainly an elite defense, and blah 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 blah. But it's an upward trajectory. It's growth in the right direction for sure. But I really don't think at the end of the day it's 1A, 1B, as a lot of people have kind of suggested. I still think it's 1-2, and I still think Canada is the stronger program and the best team. But it's coming. That's for sure.
For sure. Is it possible? And this is maybe a little more philosophical outside of this rivalry in particular, but can you have a real rivalry where it's always super one-sided? Like, I'm a Leaf fan sitting here in Ottawa, and it was 4 straight, and then last year 5 straight playoff wins over the Sens. I still, as a Leaf fan, felt like the Sens were a rival. Certainly Sens fans felt that way. But the Bruins have sort of kicked my team around in the most recent decade.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Bruins fans see Leaf fans as a rivalry. Like, when you kind of zoom out and how many times Canada's got the best of the U.S., is it just the fact that, well, it is the U.S. and it's right to our south and they dominate everything we do that makes it a rival? Or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on how you define what a rivalry is. But
does it have to be even?
No. Well, interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point. Well, listen, those Bruins. Yeah, I mean, Bruins are even kind of Florida. Yeah,
Yes,
there were certainly listen, the Leafs didn't win those series, and you probably would like a victory here, sprinkled in here and there. But I think I do. No, I know. I do. Yeah, we all would. But I do think those are rivalries. I because it's not like one team is trouncing the other. They're hotly competitive, and I know in Boston, from a Bruins perspective, for sure they consider the Leafs their rivals. Absolutely. But it's funny, like, we went to China in 2000, and I got a chance to play hockey around the country there, and certainly up in northern China in Harbin, and met players that were part of the Chinese national team program in the 60s and 70s, and they were very tight. Obviously, the Russians would come over, they would take the train over, and they would instruct Chinese kids in northern China. Boy, the game would be I really think, man, it would be great to develop a program there and get more Chinese kids playing. Because if for some reason China was somehow able to develop a hockey program and be competitive, more competitive than they are today, that would just, because it is.
Well, it's another world power in the mix, right?
Exactly. I mean, hockey, I always, when people talk about, the kind of pool of, competitive hockey nations being relatively small, it's easy to kind of concur with that. But I think one of the things that does kind of validate it is you traditionally have had 2 superpowers. You've had the Russians and the United States, and now with the Russians removed, I think it weakens it even more. Obviously, dilutes it even more. But if you could somehow figure out a way to kind of get Chinese kids to play, that would be even great too. But that's probably for decades down the road, anyways. So we are. Yeah,
like having had them just host the Olympics, if they didn't jump onto it then, they're probably not ready to anytime in the near future. And I guess they sort of, they entered a team in the KHL and whatever, but they didn't fully wrap their arms around it.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm sort of curious here. Like I said, as I sit here in the nation's capital, there's a lot of angst around Brady Tkachuk. Obviously, I'm a Leaf guy. Auston Matthews, how they both just visited the White House in Winnipeg. It'll be Connor Hellebuck, and Kyle Connor got back earlier. I don't know what the whole story is there. But I'm just sort of curious what you think, and maybe they're not different, what the reaction is going to be in those first home games, because you got to assume the teams are going to congratulate, certainly their captains here in Ottawa and Toronto. Were they going to get cheered? Will they still get cheered after the White House thing? What is your expectation, and what do you think the correct response here is? Because now this is very much where they do cross, right? It is very political now. They have sort of allowed themselves to be part of that, propaganda or whatever you want to call it. But what do you think is going to happen here when these guys play their first home games?
I mean, I frankly think there's been immutable damage caused to the sport and the culture and the players and the teams. I really believe that. I think, the team won. They won their gold. I even think you give them a little bit of a mulligan on the dressing room celebrations with Kash Patel. I don't think you can excuse them for what happened when the president mentioned the women's team.
Right.
But I even think, like, you can walk away from that a little bit. You're celebrating. You're hammered. Like you just anything's kind of possible in that environment. Whatever.
Everybody sort of fakes a laff with 5
sure.
beers deep and 20. But
whatever.
It's
Okay,
not good.
blah, 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 you walk away from it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's like Matthew Tkachuk is the leader of that program and that team.
Yep.
They follow him.
Yep.
They follow him to South Beach. They're singing in the strip bar. They're eating burgers with Trump in the White House. That's when you think about just the enormous retinue of managers, agents, parents, the entire just the sea of people that are around those
PR
players.
staffs are crazy
Man,
right now.
to not have one of them say, you know what, guys?
Yeah.
You got a good excuse here.
Yeah.
Head back to your club teams.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. But I can kind of only anecdotally. And just from a personal sense, what people have told me, what my friends have told me, what my teammates have told me, there has been real damage. Now, sure, we'll find out if Auston Matthews and Brady Tkachuk score hat tricks and they lead their team into the playoffs. We'll see. I think we're still, because our love is, unconditional in so many ways with the game. We'll see. But I do think I think hockey culture is really taking it on the chin, and I think those players have done damage by being seen as validating and you're right, being a tool of propaganda for one of the worst leaders ever. And I could go on and on, but we all know what I meant to talk about, don't we all? So. Really, just a very, very, very bad turn. Very bad turn.
It really is, and like you said, I'm with you in the sense that the stuff in the locker room afterwards, where for a moment at least, maybe you don't even notice Kash Patel is in the room, and then any team is taking a call from the president of their country. The women's thing, it's not good, and it's not a good look that none of these guys have found a moment in the 72 hours since to apologize and go, all of that is relevant, but when you show up in the White House and when you it's going to be tough on these guys that have to come back to Canada, and especially the two that are captains. And I guess I would throw Hellebuck into that because while he's not the captain, he is the star in Winnipeg, right? He is the guy there. I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know that they're going to get booed. Maybe they will. I don't know that they're going to get cheered like they might have, though, had they just...
There's a story from 2010. After Canada won gold in Vancouver in 2010, those players went back to their hotel, and I think it was Pronger who sort of said, "What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing just in our hotel? Like, let's." I don't remember where they went, but I think that maybe they went to just the restaurant or the bar in the hotel or something. And he was like, we got to do something. And at one point they realized that Sid wasn't with them. And so I think it was Pronger. I can't remember, but my friend from Hockey Canada told me this. They went up to Crosby's room and they knocked on the door, and Crosby came to the door and he was sitting on his bed watching TV.
Right.
And you know what? Because he battled and battled and battled, and they won this championship. Now, all of a sudden, it's become this kind of, nauseatingly excessive.
Yes.
I just think it would be.
Well, in 2014, everyone was just on a flight back from Russia. We got games in 2 days. Like, I sort of was willing to give them the pass on Monday night again. We landed in Miami. We're all still here. Let's have one more blow.
Oh, my God.
And then on Tuesday... every NHL team will excuse you from practice, but that's the day you make your way back to your teams and you're there because games start here on Wednesday night, right? And now when the president invites you this is where we get into propaganda and things you don't the White House could have invited them on July 20th and had this big blowout, but it's got to be now. It's got to be the State of the Union. You got to. It gets really messy.
Well, right, because Trump's people are telling him, and Stephen Miller's telling him that getting these guys in the White House and having them at the State of the Union, that is going to be good for business, right? And and they just followed his lead. So hopefully it's a bit of a cautionary tale as we move forward. Win the gold medal, celebrate, great, fine, but a bit.
Frankly,
of
the party
too.
with Flava Flav sounds better than the White
I
Sox
know.
party anyway. So, what do you think
so
this
true.
means? Just as we wrap up here, moving forward, there is supposed to be a World Cup in 2028, back to the Olympics in 2030. Did this do anything for the rivalry, or were they always going to play? I guess I sort of already. So, does a rivalry have to be even? Is there anything coming out of these games that you think Hockey Canada has to look at and go, we need to do better or improve upon? Or was their performance in that gold medal game, proof that they were on the right track here?
When we forget about 72, there's so much mythology about 72. Paul Henderson scores the goal in Game 7. He beats 4 Russians. He's sailing on his stomach. He hacks at the puck, and it goes over Tkachuk's shoulder into the net, and the Canadians survive. There are so many things that happened in those last 3 games that are really similar to what happened in the gold medal game in Canada's favor, right? Sometimes, that there are, in any sport, Kirk Gibson with a broken leg, on and on and on. And that's one of the things, as sports fans, we've got to remember that the impossible keeps bringing it. That's why we go back to sort of look at, these impossible runs and these impossible games that are so astonishing to us, and we can't believe our eyes. And I think that was the case in the gold medal game. And, do you have a take? I kind of brought this up that I was willing, and I guess just on our last show we recorded Sunday afternoon, not long after that gold medal game, I go, you know what? Canada's fine. They carried play. I wish this had gone differently, but everything was fine. And I got a message to our social medias after I posted that show going, you barely squeaked by the Czechs and barely squeaked by the Finns. Should we not be putting some distance between those and giving some space? We feel unlucky in this game, but were we lucky to get through the first 2? That did make me take a step back and go, I wonder if there isn't something that we should look at. And I'm not saying another big summit or anything like that, but... Well, yeah, I mean, listen, Canada beat the States, squeaked by the States in Sochi to win the gold medal, but they didn't really. They dominate. And I think you could probably say the same thing about the Finnish game too. They were pretty dominant. And, Czech's a little bit of a different story, but I also do think it was clear who the better team was. So, no, I don't really kind of agree on those 2 points. The country is fine. I think the team is fine. Nothing to see there, I don't think. So really interesting. I mean, Binnington, Hellebuck, I think that's a rivalry that for the ages that we're going to be charting, as it moves along.
Division rivals, playoff games too.
Yeah, the Binnington's first playoff start was against Hellebuck in 2019, and
Elliot Friedman reported just during one of his most recent podcasts. He said that before, I can't remember if it was. In the car wash this August or whatever. Yeah. He said we asked each of them to say something nice about each other, and that was the only question they both went, nah, I'm not doing that. So there's a real rivalry there.
For sure, of course. And Binnington makes those extraordinary saves in the gold medal, in the Four Nations overtime, and Hellebuck, is equal to him in the goal. It's really great. It's good. It's really great to see. That's really fun when that sort of stuff happens. So. But yeah, Canada hockey, very strong. So
100%. I always appreciate your time here, Dave. I know it's been a little while since we've had you on, but I always appreciate your insights. What's going on just as we wrap here on the West End Phoenix right now for listeners down in the GTA?
Yeah, I know I'm finishing this book about goaltending as well. So I kind of got to get that off to the publisher, I think, in the next little while. So that's going to be good. And yeah, our sports issue actually is coming out this weekend. We have Akeem Alou on the cover from McCormick Arena, and there's lots of great stuff in there. So if people want to subscribe, they just go to westernphoenix.com. And we, if you don't live in the GTA, we mail everywhere in Canada. We have about 1,000 readers across Canada, and we deliver in the city too. So yeah, it'd be great to have you on.
Beauty. We will link to that certainly in the show notes, and also your most recent piece here from the Star. I thought was interesting to take a step back and
Thanks. I have another one I think coming out today too. So I'll put that one up on Blue Sky when it becomes available.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave Bidini. Always appreciate your time, my friend. There he goes, Dave Bidini from the West End Phoenix, the Rio Statics. and of course, publisher of several really interesting hockey books. I've checked out most of them. I haven't finished them all yet, I'll be real with you, but just a really interesting guy who's traveled the world to talk hockey, and it kind of gives him this unique perspective when you get back home to be like, I can zoom out a little here, and hockey's place in the world, Canada's place in the world, Canada's way of viewing the world through the hockey lens. Really interesting guy, like I said. The books are well worth a read. Certainly the piece in the Star. We'll link to all of it here in the show notes at tallcanaudio.com or wherever you're hearing me right now. We'll wrap it up here. We're back to NHL action on Wednesday night for the Leafs, Thursday night for the Sens, across the NHL here over the next couple days. No doubt that will give us plenty to talk about the next time we convene here on the Tall Can Audio Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this one. My name's Matt Robinson. We'll catch you next time.
I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.